What's your I finally met my online friend horror story? I met a guy online. We really got on and he came over a few times so we could hang out. I did find him attractive and tried to hint that I was into him. Note: I can't flirt to save my life. But nothing ever happened. After a few dates, he suddenly vanished offline. No social media, he wasn't answering texts or emails, nothing. I thought he'd ghosted me. After 6 months he reappears. I asked him where he'd been and he said, "I don't want to talk about it." A few weeks after, there was a fad where people were Googling their names and posting humorous stories they had found about similar people with their name. Mine was about a ship that had my initials. And I started to Google friends' names just out of boredom, morbid curiosity. Googled his name and found a local news story from his area. One of those crime in courts things that he had been done for statutory rape of a minor, online grooming, and had his computer and phone seized as evidence. Said he was 14. Turns out he was 38. My parents gave him a stern talking to. Edit. Everyone is saying how he was a child molester and all that, but let me clear thing up. He was always nice and friendly online until I found his Facebook and saw his age. At which my parents had a mental breakdown. Was never allowed to play video games with him online again. Guy the first, new in college, met a girl online and spent every day talking about her. She lived about 6 hours away, so he planned to take a semester off and pursue this relationship. He got a job in her town and asked if I'd help him move out there since my car would hold more than he could take on a bus. I had a long weekend off and figured, why not? A road trip could be fun. I drive them out as a goodbye present, and the way back I planned to visit Yellowstone. Well, we arrive and it turns out he doesn't have an apartment lined up and he found a job posting in his girlfriend's town. He hadn't actually gotten the job or even applied yet. I make a bunch of phone calls and find him a room to rent that will let him move in that day with just first, last, and deposit, even without a job. Continued. I'm tired and disgusted with his lack of planning, but figure it's worth staying the night and trying to end things on good terms with my buddy. Then he breaks down and confesses that he hasn't actually met this girl. The nights he spent video chatting with her were really just him watching her vlog and jacking it. They've never talked, never texted, never even emailed. Hell, he's never even left so much as a comment or like on one of her videos. She genuinely didn't, still doesn't, know he existed. His plan was to hang out at this game shop she talks a lot about until she showed up and somehow create a relationship from that. He thought that they'd meet and she'd fall in love with him and move back to our college town to marry him this year, all before the next semester began. That didn't happen. Instead, I made my buddy buy a bus ticket for his ride back to school and left. He came back to school and got more cringy, not less. I lost track of him after that. This is way back in the mid-90s. Bulletin board systems were all the rage. I made friends with this guy from NC. He was friends with a bunch of us from my dorm. Mostly females, which should probably have been a red flag, but I was extremely naive at the time. A couple months in, he mentioned he was coming to our state for a wedding and asked if he could come by our college to meet everyone. It was agreed he'd sleep in my dorm room since my roommate was almost never around. Now, there was no discussion or thought of sex, but I was pretty excited to meet this guy and see if he was as funny and charming as he was online. Well, day arrives, dude shows up. Continued. I should mention that I and all my college friends were 18 or 19. This guy was 24. Or so, he said. Guy looked like, and I'm not exaggerating, a cancer patient. Pale, gaunt features, Long, greasy, pale blonde hair except where he was bald on top, and just generally looked like he was about to die or he was dressed as a ghoul for Halloween. He insisted on hugging all of us. I was trying to remind myself that looks don't matter, and that he was a cool guy despite his very unsettling appearance. But then, when we all started hanging out, things just got worse. He was asking really invasive questions of all of us, making weird comments to whatever was said, just all around creepy and distressing. I was sitting on the floor with another friend and actively rocking back and forth from discomfort. I lied and said I had hurt my back and that sleeping on the floor helped, because that night he kept insisting we could share my tiny twin college bed. Nope, 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 nope. Last time I ever met anyone from that site. I don't know if it's a horror story, but it's how I ended up where I live now. I played WoW for years with a pretty regular group. Got to know them offline, and at one point two of them, a couple, invited me to move across the country. At the time I didn't have anything tying me to where I was, so I packed up and moved. Got out here, moved in with my friends, and everything seemed okay. My buddy was a long-haul driver, so he was always gone for days at a time. His girl would try to set me up multiple times with two of her friends at the same time. One in Minnesota. I ended up having a hard time finding work for a while. Finally got a job, though, and was putting some money away while helping watch their kids. Continued. Out of nowhere one day my buddy accuses me of trying to fool around with his girl. Nothing had ever happened, but I had noticed her spending more and more time in my room when he wasn't there. I knew his history, and his previous relationship had ended after she cheated with a friend of his. He wouldn't listen, so I got kicked out without any warning, and they stole about $1,000 worth of my stuff and later moved. Ultimately it all worked out for me. Cut the friend and his girl out of my life completely and moved on. Now I have a good job here, wife and kids. Edit clarified that I cut out the friend and the girl, lol, not my wife and kids. We were friends online for years. We'd meet up every so often, and when we started families we'd meet up and take the kids to the zoos or whatever. She wanted us to go on a cruise together, with our husbands and kids. I made the comment towards the effect of "we can't afford that," and she went nuts. We shouldn't have had kids if we can't afford them. We shouldn't have more children. Our life sucks, blah blah blah, because I didn't want to go on a goddamn cruise with her and her bratty ass kid. Sounds like a nightmare. After college ended, I was playing a game called EVE Online. I was in a corporation with a dude who I thought was the coolest. He had sold stuff in-game for real-world money and had built a supercomputer. He had a smoking hot girlfriend, and had pictures of them rock climbing doing some super cool stuff. He was also like a head chef where he worked, and since I was a chef as well, I had a little bit of a bromo crush on him this year. He told me after I graduated that he could hook me up with a manager job, and all I had to do was move up there. I sold everything I owned that day at a pawn shop and bought a U-Haul and started driving. Continued. 1 hour before I got there, it was like a week-long drive. He called me and told me the job was no longer available and I shouldn't come. When he found out how close I was, he said to just come anyways. When I got there, I was completely blown away. They lived in a disgusting Section 8 apartment with 4 other people. In a 1-bedroom apartment. They had like 3 cats, which I am allergic to, and a kid as well. Day 1, it was all drugs and partying. I did not partake. I was not enthused. Day 2, I went into the city looking for a stuff job to survive. I got one. It was stuff. Day 3, my buddy tells me we're all moving out and into a nice apartment. Week 3, we actually move into a new apartment. And the first night in that apartment, he starts beating his smoking hot girl in front of their kid. continued. The second time he beat her, I called the cops. Him and his girl immediately said I was the bad guy and that they were just loving each other. They had the cops escort me from the apartment. So there I was, 1,700 miles away from home, homeless at 2 a.m. And it's ducking raining on all my stuff. Lars, you are a sack of shit and I hope you die of space herpes.